until you find the form, this one. On submit, form.handle submit, and we are going to pass the on submit function. Perfect. Now everything should work, so let's test it. First transaction, the amount is 50, category will be salary, and the date will be, I don't know, this one. Let's create it, let's try. Perfect, let's check our database. So MPX Prisma Studio. Let's open the transactions table. As you can see, we have one record, the amount is 50, description is first transaction, the date is correct, the type is income, category salary, and as you can see, we have also the category icon. Perfect. Let's also check the month history. So as you can see, we have one record that says day 10, the month history, which is correct because in JavaScript, months are zero based, which means that January is 0, February is 1, March is 2, April is 3. And the year is 2024. And then we have income 50, expense 0. Let's also check the year aggregate, so year history, like that. We have only month 3, which is April, year 2024, and income 50. Perfect. Then let's create a new expense, so first expense, like that. Amount 80, category food, date will be, I don't know, end of month. Create. Perfect. Now let's check the database. Let's refresh the year history, and as you can see, we have expense 80. The month is the same. Let's refresh month history, and we have a new record. The day is 30, month 3, year 2024, income is 0, expense is 80. Perfect. Now let's try adding a new expense on the same day. So back to the project, new expense, second expense, like that. Amount 50, category food, and the date will be the same of the previous one, so 30. Create, back to the database. Let's refresh the month history, and as you can see, we have updated the expense. Let's also check the year history, and the expense is updated. That's perfect. Then we are going to fix that create transaction UI, because as you can see, the category and the transaction date are not aligned. So then let's search for the category form field. Let's style the form item, so this one, flex and flex call. Let's do the same for the date form item, so this one, and that's perfect. Now we are going to fix the calendar null selection, so let's search for the calendar. And what we are going to do is that we are going to take the value from the calendar, like that, and we are going to log it, so console.log calendar, let's log the value, and then we are going to call field.onChangeValue, like that. Now let's try it. So if I click 22, as you can see, I have removed the selections. And if I try to create the transaction now, I will have a validation error. So we are going to fix this. So if value is not defined, return, like that. And basically now you are forced to select a date. Perfect. Now let's go back to the demo application. And the next thing that we are going to do is this overview section. So let's go and do that. Let's open the Project Explorer. Inside the dashboard folder, let's open page.tsx file. Then before the last div, so this one, we are going to add the overview component that takes user settings. So user settings, like that. Let's close the component. Let's go back to the Project Explorer. Let's open the components folder inside dashboard, and let's add the file overview.tsx. Let's mark this file with use client, like that. Let's create our base overview component, this one, back to page.tsx, and let's import from app dashboard components overview. Now back to the overview.tsx file. Let's add the user settings properties, user settings. Let's type the properties, so user settings is of type user settings that you can import from Prisma. Perfect. Then we are going to define some states, so const date range, set date range, use state that you can import from React. Let's type this with an object from date to date, like that. And the initial value will be an object with from start of month. You can import start of month from datefns, new date, like that, and to new date, like that. Perfect. Now we are going to add a date range picker component. If you don't want to use an external library, you can use the shadcn calendar component. What I'm going to use instead is the date range picker component for ShadCN made by John Polasek. Now, these components relies on ShadCN UI components, for example, the button, calendar, label, popover, and switch. You should already have those installed. If you don't have something, you have to install it with npx ShadCN UI latest add. But if you have done what I've done at the start of the tutorial, which means installing all the packages, you should already have everything. Then we are going to install Redux UI React icons, so let's copy this command, open the terminal, npm install @redux UI/react icons. Let's paste it. Perfect. And then what we have to do is to copy the date input file and also the date range picker file that you can find in source, dateinput.tsx and date range picker.tsx, and you need to copy those files inside components UI. So let's open the project explorer. Let's open the components folder, UI, let's add a new file, date-input.tsx, like that. Let's copy the content from here. So copy raw file, paste it, perfect. Then let's add a new file, date-range-picker.tsx. Let's copy it, so this one, date-range-picker.tsx, copy raw file, paste it. Perfect. Now let's go back to the overview.tsx file. Let's replace this div with a fragment, like this. Within it, we are going to add a div, let's style that. Container, flex wrap, item send, justify between, gap to py6, like that. Within the div, we will have a h2 tag, let's style it, text 3XL, font bold. Within it, we are going to write overview, like that. After the h2 tag, we are going to add a div, let's style it, flex, item center, gap 3. Within the div, we are going to add the date range picker component from components UI date range picker. Then let's close it. Let me restore for one moment the zoom on the page. So as you can see, the component has shortcuts on the left on the desktop version, and you can select a range like that. Perfect. Now let me restore the zoom, and then let's set some properties on the date range picker. So initial date from will take date range dot from, initial date to, date range dot to, show compare false, and then on update we take values, we extract the from and to from values dot range, like that. Let me also add a comment so you will understand better. We update the date range only if both dates are set. So if not from or not to, return. Then we are going to limit the date range days span, because we are not going to allow, for example, to query 1 year or 2 years directly. So let's open back Project Explorer. Inside the lib folder, let's create a file, constants.ts. And within this file, we are going to export const max date range days, like that. I'm going to set 90, for example. If you want, you can limit that more to 1 month, or if you prefer, you can increase that. So back to overview.tsx. Then we are going to validate the date range. So if difference in days, and you can import this from date fns, to and from, you start from date left and then date right, is greater than max date range days that you can import from lib constants. In this case, you are going to return an error message. So toast that you can import from sonner.error, the selected date range is too big. Max allowed range is, let's interpolate the variable max date range here, so max date range days, like that, and then days. Exclamation point, and after the toast we are going to return. Otherwise, we are going to set date range with the from and to, like that. Let's refresh the page, and as you can see now, the default selected range is from start of month to date. Perfect. And then before moving on, let's fix a typo that I have here, so max allowed, like that. Perfect. Now let's try to select 30 days, and this is working. Let's try to select more than 90 days, so from January to April. And as you can see, we are triggering an error. The selected date range is too big. Max allowed range is 90 days. Perfect. Now back to the demo application. And now we are going to create the income, expense, and balance card. Back to our project. Let's open the Project Explorer. Inside the API folder, we are going to create a new folder called stats. Within it, we are going to create a new folder called balance, and within this folder, a file called route.ts. Then, as usual, we are going to export async function get that takes request of type request, like that. We are going to get the user, so const user equal await current user. You can import that from Clerk.Next.js. If the user is not defined, we are going to redirect, import that from next navigation to the sign-in page, like that. This API will return the total amount and the total income for the selected period. And so the search parameters will be the from and the to date. So we are going to extract those and validate. Const search params equal new URL request.url, like that. Then const from equal search params.get from, const to equal search params.get to. Perfect. Then we are going to validate from and to, and we are going to do the same check that we have done in the date range picker. So we are going to check if the date range selected is greater than the max allowed date range. Let's open the Project Explorer. Within the schema folder, we are going to create overview.ts file. Then export const overview query schema, like that. Z that you can import from zod.object. Within this object, we will have from, which is z.coerce.date, to z.coerce.date, and then we are going to add a custom check. So let's replace the semicolon with dot refine, like that. The refine takes a function that takes an argument, which is from and to. So we are going to define that like this, args. Then let's define the function body, const extract from and to from args, like that. Then const days equal difference in days that you can import from datefns to from. We start from the left date and then the right date. Then we will have const is valid range equal. This will be true if days is greater than 0 and if days is lower than max that range days that you can import from libconstants. And finally, we are going to return is valid range, like that. Now let's go back to the route.ts file. Let's validate from and to. So const query params equal overview query schema dot save parse. This takes an object with from and to, like that. If query params.success is false, return response.json, query params.error.message, and then status 400, like that. Then we are going to get the stats, so const stats equal await, and we are going to create a helper function called get balance stats that takes the user.id and then query params.data.from query params.data.to. And finally, we are going to return those, so return response.json stats. Now we are going to define this getBalanceStats function, and then I'm going to explain why we are creating this function. So after the get function, we are going to define async function getBalanceStats that takes user ID of type string from of type date to of type date, like that. And we have created this function because now we are going to export this function type. So export type getBalanceStats response type, like this, equal awaited return type of getBalanceStats, and let's close this like that. By doing this, we can just import this type on the front end. So for example, we can type the use query that will call this API with the fetch library with the getBalanceStats response type. And thanks to this type, which is the return type of this function, we will have a type inference for these API calls. Now let's define the function. So const totals equal await prisma, and you can import it from libprisma, transaction group by. This takes an object. We are going to group by, so by, and we are going to group the type, like that. Then let's add the where filter. So where we are going to filter for the user ID, so user ID. And then we are going to filter the date field, and the date field must be greater than equal from and lower than equal to. And we are going to sum the amount. So basically we are doing a query on the transaction table that takes all the transaction for the user that has the date field between from and to. We are going to group the result by type and we are going to sum the amount field. And then we can just return, we are going to return an object, expense, like that, totals.find. We are going to find the group by result for the expense type, so find t.type equal expense. This can be null, so let's check that. We are going to get the sum and then dot amount. Now this can be null because we can select the date range periods where we don't have expense transactions. So we are going to cover the case with an or 0 like that. Let's add a comma, let's copy this, let's paste, and then let's replace expense with income also here, and that's all for this API. Now let's check the type, and as you can see, this is typed correctly. Now let's open the Project Explorer and let's open the overview.tsx file. Then let's scroll down, and before the fragment closing tag, we are going to add a stats cards component that will have some properties. So user settings that takes the user settings property, from that takes date range dot from, and then to that takes date range dot to, like that. Back to the Project Explorer, within the components folder, let's create a new file, stats cards.tsx. Let's use client at the beginning, then let's define the stats cards component like that. Back to the overview.tsx file, let's import stats cards from app dashboard components stats card. Now let's go back to the stats cards component. Let's define the properties, so interface props, from of type date to of type date, and then user settings of type user settings that you can import from Prisma client. Perfect. Then let's add the properties to the component, so from to user settings, and the type is props. Now we can use a React query in order to fetch the API that we have created, so const stats query equal query, and you can import that from tanstack React query. And now we are going to use the type that we have exported, so get balance stats response type, and you can import that from app API stats balance root.ts. So let's import it. Then let's define the properties from use queries. Let's start by the query key. In this case, we will have overview, then stats, and then we are going to add the query parameters that we are going to use, so from and to. Thanks to this, every time that we receive a new data range, the query gets refetched. Then let's add the query function, that is a function that calls the fetch API, /API /stats balance, and then we have the query parameters, so from, let's interpolate that. And now we are going to use the date to UTC function that we have created. And thanks to that, we are going to remove the time zone from our date, so from. And then we are going to add two parameters, so and to equal, let's interpolate again, date to UTC date to. And I don't know if I have mentioned that, but you can import date to UTC date from lib helpers. Then we are going to get the response from the fetch, and we are going to call res.json like that. Let's go back to our demo application. And as you can see in the stats card component, we are formatting the number with the user currency. So now we are going to create the formatter back to our code. And after stats query, we are going to define const formatter equal. Then we are going to use memo that you can import from React. So the first argument is a function like this, and the second argument is the dependency array. Let's define the function. And here we are going to return get formatter for currency that takes the user settings.currency. Now let's add the dependency, which is user settings. And you can also see that if I over there React use memo has a missing dependency, user settings.currency. So let's do that. Now we are going to define the get formatter for currency helper function. So back to the Project Explorer, inside the lib folder, let's open the helpers.ts file. Let's define export function, get formatter for currency, that takes currency, which is a string. And in this function, we are going to get the correct locale for the formatter, so const locale, currencies that you can import from lib currencies.find. And we are going to get the currency, so C, that has the value, so c.value equals to the currency, which is this parameter. And if this exists, we are going to read locale property like that. And then return new int L number format, locale, and let's set also some options, so style, and you can choose between percent, unit, decimal, or currency, like that. And then we are going to set the currency like that. Perfect. Now back to the stats cards component. Let's import this from lib helpers. Then we are going to define const income equal stats query dot data question mark, because this can be null, dot income, and if this is null, we are going to cover it, so or 0, like that. Let's copy this, let's paste it, then expense. Let's replace income here with expense. Perfect. Then we are going to define also const balance equal income minus expense, like that. Now let's style this div, so class name, relative, flex, w full, flex wrap, gap 2, and on medium, flex no wrap. Now let me center the code. Then we are going to use the skeleton wrapper that you can import from components skeleton wrapper. And this is the component that we have defined while making the wizard page. We are going to set isLoading to stats query.isFetching, like that. Within the skeleton wrapper, we are going to render a stat card component like this. The stats card component requires a formatter, so let's pass it, formatter, like that. And that's why we are using useMemo, because we don't want this to be recalculated on each render, since it's going to be passed down to children components. Then we are going to set value to income, the title to income, and the stat card will also have an icon, so let's set it. And we are going to use the trending up component that you can import from Lucid React. Let's close the tag and then let's style the icon. H12, W12, items center, rounded LG, P2, text emerald 500, background emerald 400, and we are going to set opacity to 10%, like that. Then we are going to define this component, so at the end of the file, function stat card, like that. Let's define the properties, so formatter, value, title, icon. Then we need to type the properties, so formatter is of type int L dot number format, like that. Icon is a React node, title is a string, and value is a number. Now, before moving on, we are going to install the React count app component, so open the terminal and type npm install react-count app. Perfect. Then inside the statCard component, we are going to define a const format function, and this is the function that we will use with the React count app in order to format the number. So let's define that with use callback that you can import from React. The first argument is a function, the second one is the dependency array. Let's define the function. This takes a value which is a number, like that, and we are going to return formatter.format value. And in the dependency array, we are going to add the formatter. Perfect. Now we are going to define return, within it the card component that you can import from components UI card. Let's style the card, flex, H24, W full, item center, gap 2, P4. Let's close the tag. Within the card we are going to render the icon, like that. After the icon we are going to add a div, let's style it, flex, flex call, item center, gap 0. Within the div, we will have a paragraph, so let's add it, let's style it, text muted foreground, like that, and we are going to display the title inside. Then let's import the count app component, so import count app from react-count app, like that. Back to the bottom of the file. Now let's use the count app component, like that. Let's add some properties to it, so preserve value, redraw false, and value, decimals 2, formatting function, this takes format function, and then class name text to Excel. Let's save it, and this is strange because this is really slow. Let's see what happens. And as you can see, we have an error, so let's see the error, network, and let's refetch the query. So we have a 404 status. Now let's double check the URL, API stats balance. This seems okay, so let's go back in the Project Explorer. Let's open the API folder, stats, this is written okay, balance, And the error is in routes.ts because we need to rename it to route.ts, like that. It's my bad. Let's try now. Let's refresh the application. And as you can see now, we are fetching some data. Perfect. So let's go back to the stats card component. Then let's copy the skeleton wrapper with its content. Then let's paste it 2 times. Perfect. Let's close the DevTools. Now we don't need those. Then let's update the second skeleton wrapper. So let's change the value to expense, like that. Then let's change the title to expense. Let's change the icon trending up to trending down. And you can import that from Lucid React. Let's change emerald with the red and also this one, like that. Let's try. Perfect. Okay, then let's expand our filter. So let's get till the end of the month and we should have expenses, right? Perfect. Now let's update the third skeleton wrapper with the value balance, title balance. Let's change the trending up icon with wallet icon that you can import from Lucid React, like that. So wallet. And let's change emerald to violet, also here, like that. Let's try it. Perfect. Now, as you can see, we have still one error because there is no space between the card and the border of the page. So let's go back in overview.tsx file. Let me wrap the stats card with a div. So let's do that, like that. Let's style the div, container flex, wfull, flex call, gap2. Let's try it now. Perfect. Now let's see if everything is okay on mobile. Perfect. Now let's go back to the demo project. And now we are going to add the stats cards for categories. So back to our project. Let's go back to the overview.tsx file. And after the stats card component, let's add categories stats. Let's close it. And this component takes the same properties that takes the stats card component. So we can copy those. Then let's paste like that. Let's open the Project Explorer. Within the components folder inside the dashboard, we are going to create a new file, categories stats.tsx, like that. Then let's use client at the beginning. Then let's create the components, so categories stats, like that. Back to overview.tsx file. Let's import the component from app dashboard components categories stats. Then back to categories stats. Let's define the properties, so interface props. User settings is of type user settings that you can import from Prisma client. From is a date and to is a date, like that. Let's add the properties to the component, so user settings from to, and the type is props. Perfect. Now we are going to create the API that will provide categories stats. So back to the Project Explorer, within the API folder, within the stats folder, let's create a new folder called categories, like that. Let's create a new file, route.ts, then export async function, get, this take a request of type request, like that. Then we get the user, so const user equal await current user. You can import that from Clerk Next.js. If the user is not defined, we are going to redirect, and you can import that from Next Navigation to the sign-in page, like that. Then we are going to do the same thing that we have done for the stats cards component, so const, let's deconstruct search params, like that. From new URL, request.url. From the search params, we are going to extract from, so const from equal search params.get from. Then we are going to read the to parameters, so const to equal search params.get to. Then we are going to validate the from and to parameters, so const query params equal overview query schema that you can import from schema overview dot save parse. This takes an object with from and to. Then if query params dot success is false, throw new error query params dot error dot message, like that. Then we are going to define const stats equal await get categories stats, like that. This takes the user.id, query params.data.from and query params.data.to. And then we are going to return response.json stats. Perfect. Now let's define this function. So async function get categories stats. This takes a user ID of type string from of type date to of type date. So let's define the stats const stats equal await prisma, and you can import that from lib prisma dot transaction dot group by. This will be pretty similar with the API that we have done for the overview section for the stats cards. So we are going to group by type and also by category and also by category icon, like that. Let's set the where object, but let me center the code first, like that. So we filter for user ID and also for the date field. The date field must be greater than equal from, lower than equal to. After the where, we are going to define sum, and we are going to sum the amount, so amount true. And we are going also to order by the sum, the amount field, and this will be the send, like that. And then we are going to return stats, so return stats. If you prefer, you can just return this, so return await prisma.transaction, etc. Then we are going to export the type, so export type, get categories, stats, response type. We are going to use awaited in order to get rid of the promise. Return type of, and then the name of the function, so get categories, stats, like that. Let's check the type, perfect. We are going to call that API with the React query and the fetch library, so const stats query equal use query that you can import from Tanstack React query. Let's pass an object to it, let's set the query key. We are going to start with overview, then stats, then categories, then from and to, like that. Before moving on, let's open back the create transaction dialog. Let's search for the onSuccess callback, and if you remember, on success we are invalidating all the queries which query key starts with overview. And that's why we are using the overview string in the query key of the category stats. Now back here, let's define the query function. This is a function that returns a fetch call, like that. The API URL is API stats categories. Then we add the query parameters, so question mark, from equal, then we interpolate date to UTC date. You can import that from lib helpers, from, like that. And then we add end to equal, and then we interpolate date to UTC date to, like that. Then we get the response, so then res, like that, and then we are going to use res.json. Then we are going to define the formatter, so const formatter equal use memo that you can import from React. The first argument is a function, like that. The second one is the dependency array. Return get formatter for currency that you can import from lib helpers. And then we are going to use user settings.currency. Then we update the dependency array with user settings.currency. Now let's style the div, so class name, let me center the code, flex w full, flex wrap gap2, md flex no wrap, like that. Let's replace the text category stats with a skeleton wrapper that you can import from components skeleton wrapper. Then we set the isLoading property with stats query.isFetching. Within the skeleton wrapper, we are going to add a categories card. Then let's add some properties to it, so the formatter, like that. Type will be income, and data will be stats query dot data or empty array, like that. Now let's define this component. So at the end of the file, we are going to define function categories card. This takes data, type, and formatter. Now let's type the properties. So we will have type is of type transaction type that you can import from lib types. The formatter is of type intel.number format, like that. And the data is of type get categories response type that you can import from app API stats categories route.ts. Then let's copy the type. We are going to type also the use query hook. So let's do that, like that, perfect. Then let's define the categories card body. We are going to filter the data, so const filtered data equal data.filter. We are going to get all the elements that has the same type of the type that we have in the properties, so l.type equal type, like that. Then we are going to calculate the total amount, so const total equal filtered data.reduce. The first argument is a function, and this function takes the accumulator and also the current element. The body function will return the accumulator plus element.sum that can be null, so question mark dot amount or 0, like that. Then let's add the second argument to the reduce, which is the initial value, and the initial value will be 0, like that. Perfect. Then we are going to type return. Then we will have a card component that you can import from components UI card. Let's style it. H80 W full, like that. Let me center the code. Within the card we will have a card header that you can import from components UI card. Within it a card title and with the same import path, so components UI card. Then let's style the card title, grid flow row, justify between, gap to, text muted foreground, and on medium breakpoint, so MD semicolon, grid flow column, like that. Then let's add a style to the card component, so in class name, let's add call span6, like that. Then after the card header, let's add a div, let's style it, flex item center, justify between gap 2. Within the div, if filtered data.length is equal to 0, then we are going to render a div, let's style it, flex h60, w full, flex call, item center, justify center, like that. Within the div, we will have the text no data for the selected period. After the text, let's add a paragraph, like that. Then let's style with text SM, text muted foreground. Within the paragraph, try selecting a different period or try adding new, and then we are going to check the type. So if type is equal to income, we are going to write incomes, like that. Otherwise, expenses. Now let's try to select something in February, for example. And now we can see no data for selected period, try selecting a different period, or try adding new incomes. That's perfect. Now let's go back in the category stats component. Then we are going to duplicate the skeleton wrapper, so let's copy, let's paste, and then let's replace the type from income to expense, like that. And don't worry about this strange alignment, because right now the UI is zoomed. If I reset the zoom, you can see that everything looks fine. So let me restore the zoom. Then after this section, we are going to add another section. So if filtered data.length is greater than 0, like that, then we are going to render a scroll area component that you can import from components UI scroll area. Let's style it, so H60, full width, so W full, like that, PX4. Within this component, we will have a div, let's style it, flex W full, flex call, gap 4, P4, like that. Within the div, we are going to map over data, so filtered data.map, and for each item, we will have a function, so let's define that. Within the function, we are going to calculate the amount, so const amount, and the amount will be item.sum.amount or 0, like that. Then we are going to define cost percentage, and this will be amount times 100 divided by total or amount, like that. And that's why we have defined this total variable at the beginning. Then let's add the return statement. Within it a div, let's style it with flex call, gap 2. Let's also add a key to it, so key item.category. Then within the div, we are going to add another div, let's style it, flex item center, justify between. Then we have a span, let's style it, flex item center, text gray 400. Within the span, we are going to render the item.category icon and also the item.category, like that. Now let's restore the selection to this month, for example. Then let's extend the selection to the end of the month, so we can see also expenses right there, perfect. But we don't have a card title, so let's go back here. Yeah, I forgot to put the content inside, so back to the card title. If the type is equal to income, we are going to render the incomes. Otherwise, we are going to write expenses and then by category text. Perfect. Now let's go back inside the span, and then after the category icon and the category name, we are going to add a new span, so let's add it like that. Let's style it, margin left 2, text XS, text muted foreground. Within the span, we will have parentheses, that curly braces, within it the percentage, like that. Then we are going to remove digits, so to fixed 0, like that. And then after the curly brace, we are going to add the percentage sign, like that. Perfect. Then after the second span, so here, let me center the code, we are going to add another span, let's style it, text SM, text gray 400. And within the span, we are going to use the formatter, so formatter.format, and we are going to read the amount from that. Perfect. Then after the div, so this one, let me center the code, we are going to display a progress bar. So progress, and you can import that from components UI progress. The value is the percentage like that. And then we are going to add a custom property to the progress called indicator, like that. Then we are going to check if type is equal to income. In that case, we are going to apply BG Emerald 500, otherwise BG Red 500, like that. Now we are going to add the indicator property to the progress component. So let's open back the Project Explorer. Within components in the root folder, so this one. Let's open the UI folder, then let's open the progress.tsx file. So right here. Now we need to add the indicator property to the properties. So we are going to expand this type, so right here, and then an object, then indicator, which is an optional string, like that. Then inside the progress primitive indicator, we are going to wrap the class name with curly braces. Then we are going to wrap it with the cn function, like that. And then we are going to add comma within the cn function props.indicator, like that. And now, as you can see, the progress bar has a background color. Perfect. Now let's see if everything works. So let's add a new income, like test income for progress. Amount 120, like that. Category YouTube. And the date today. Perfect. As you can see, we have reloaded everything. Let's add also a new expense. So rent, let's add 600. Let's create a new category. So housing. And then house here, icon, like that. Perfect. Create. Transaction date yesterday. And let's create it. That's perfect. Let's go fix one issue with the stats cards label. You can notice that those are kind of moving around like that while the amount goes up. Let me show you that again. So we are going to fix that. Back to the stats cards component. Then let's go at the end of the file. And let's change item center in this div with item start, like that. And now, as you can see, the issue is gone. Perfect. Now let's go back to the demo application. The next thing that we are going to implement is the history section. Let me zoom out. The history section consists of a period selector and a bar chart with a custom tooltip. Back to our application. Open the Project Explorer. Within the dashboard folder, let's go in the page.tsx file. Then let's copy the overview component. Let's paste it. Let's replace overview with history, like that. Then let's open the Project Explorer. Within Dashboard Components folder, let's create a new component called history.tsx. Then use client. Let's define the component, like that. Back to dashboard page.tsx. Then let's import history from app dashboard components history, like that. Then back to the history component. Let's add the properties, user settings. Then let's type user settings that you can import from Prisma client, like that. Then for the charts, we are going to use recharts. So let's open the terminal and let's type npm install recharts, like that. Perfect. Then let's define some states. So const time frame, set time frame. Use state that you can import from React. We are going to use the type time frame. We need to define that. And the initial value will be month, like that. Then back to the Project Explorer. Within the lib folder, let's open the types.ts file. Then let's define our type. So export type, time frame equal. This will be a string union, month or year, like that. Let's also define another type that we are going to use in the history section. So export type, period equal year, which is a number, month, which is a number, like that. Back to the history.tsx file, let's import the time frame from lib types. Then let's define const period set period equal use state. Let's type this with period that you can import from lib types. And the initial value will be month equal new date get month, like this, and year new date get full year, like this. Then we are going to define the formatter. So const formatter equal use memo that you can import from React. The first argument is a function. The second one is the dependency array. Return get formatter for currency user settings.currency. Let's also add these to the dependency array. Perfect. Then let's style the div. So class name, container. Within the div, we are going to add a heading tag. So h2. Let's style it. Margin top 12. Text 3 XL. font bold. Within the heading, we will write history, like that. After the heading, we are going to use a card component that you can import from components UI card. Let's style it, call span 12, margin top 2, W full. Within the card, we will have a card header component, import that from components UI card. Within this, a card title component, same import. Let's style the card header with gap2. Then within the card header, we will have a card title, import that from components UI card. Let's style the card title, so class name, grid flow row, like that. Justify between, gap2, MD, grid flow call, like that. Within the card title, we are going to use the history period selector that takes the period, so period equal period, the set period function, so set period, like that, the time frame, so time frame equal time frame, and the set time frame, like that. Then let's close the tag. Then after the history period selector, we are going to add a div, let's style it, flex h10, gap2. Within the div, we are going to use the badge component that you can import from components UI badge, variant outline, and let's style it, so class name, flex item center, gap2, text sm, and within the badge we are going to add a div, let's style it, h4, w4, rounded full, background emerald 500, like that, and after the div we are going to write income. And as you can see, I have the div with nothing inside, and then I have the income text. Now let's copy the badge, let's paste it right below. Let's change emerald to red, and then let's change income with expense, like this. Now we are going to define the history period selector, so let's open the Project Explorer. Within dashboard components, we are going to create a new file, history period selector.tsx. Let's use client. Let's define the component like that. Then let's define the properties, so interface props. So period is of type period that you can import from lib types. Set period is a function that takes period of type period and returns void, like that. Then we have the time frame of type time frame that you can import from lib types. And then set time frame, which is a function that takes time frame of type time frame and returns void. Now let's use the properties, so period, set period, time frame, set time frame. And the type is props, like that. Back to history.tsx file, and now we can import the history period selector from app dashboard components history period selector. Back to the history period selector. Now we need an API that returns the history periods, so back to the Project Explorer, inside API. Let's create a new folder called history-periods, like that. Then within the folder, let's create the file route.ts. So export async function get that take request of type request, like that. Let's get the user, so const user equal await current user that you can import from Clerk Next.js. If the user is not defined, we are going to redirect to sign in page, and you can import a redirect from next navigation. Then we are going to get periods, so const periods equal get history periods, and this takes the user.id, and then we are going to return response.json with the periods, like that. Now let's define async function get history periods. This takes the user ID of type string. We have done the same thing many times, so now you know that we are going to export type get history periods response type equal awaited return type, and then type of the name of the function, so get history periods. Let's close this, perfect. Then let's define the function, const result equal await prisma that you can import from lib prisma dot month history dot find many. Then we are going to filter for the user ID, like that. We are going to select the year, so year true, like that. Then we are going to distinct the year, so year. And then order by, let's add an object, year ascend, like that. Now, since the result is an object, we are going to extract the year, so right there, const years equal result.map l dot year, like that. Let me center the code. If there are no years, so if years length is 0, like that, return the current year, like that. So we are going to return an array that contains new date, get full year, like this. Otherwise, we are going to return years. Perfect. Now let's check the type of the API, which is an array of number. Back to the history period selector. Now we are going to call the API, so const history periods equal use query that you can import from Tanstack React Query. Then we are going to set the query key. The first thing will be overview, then history, then periods, like that. Then let's define the query function, so a function. Let's call fetch library. Let's set the URL API history periods, like that. Then let's take res and let's call res.json, like that. Then let's style this div, so class name, flex wrap, item center, gap 4. So let's change the div content and let's put a skeleton wrapper that you can import from components skeleton wrapper. Let's set the isLoading property to history periods, but I don't find that. Yeah, we have a typo here, so history periods, like that. History periods dot is fetching. And then we are going to set full width to false. Then within the skeleton wrapper, we are going to add the tabs component, like that you can import from components UI tabs. Then let's set the value with time frame in the properties. And also on value change, we receive a value and we call set time frame with value, and we need to cast it so as time frame, like that. Then within tabs, we are going to add tabs list component that you can import from components UI tabs. Within it, we are going to have a tabs trigger that you can import from components UI tabs. Let's set value here, like that. Let's close the tag, and within the tag, we are going to write here, like this. Then let's duplicate the trigger, like that. Let's change the value with month, and also here with month. Now let me center the code. Then after the skeleton wrapper, let's add a div and let's style it. Flex wrap, items center, gap 2. Then within the div, we are going to use again the skeleton wrapper. Let's set is loading with history periods, dot is fetching, like this. Then we are going to use the year selector component that we have to define. Let's add the period to it, so period, the set period, so set period. And we also need the years property, so years, history periods, dot data, or an empty array, like that. Let's close this tag, perfect. Then let's go back to the use query. Let's type it, so get history periods response type that you can import from app API history periods route.ts. Then let's go at the end of the file and let's define function year selector. Let's add the properties, so period, set period, and years. Let's type those. Period is of type period. Set period is a function that takes period of type period and return nothing, so return void. And years is of type get history periods response type. And if you double check, you will see that years is an array of number. Perfect. Now let's define the year selector. So let me center the code. Return. Then we are going to use the select component that you can import from components UI select. The value will be the period dot year dot to string, like that. Then let's set on value change. This is a function that receives a value. And then we are going to update the period. So set period, the month remains the same, so period.month, and the year is parse int value, like that. Then let's close the select tag, perfect. Now within the select tag, let's add a select trigger that you can import from components UI select. Let's style it with W, which stands for width, 180 pixels, like that. Within the trigger, we are going to use the select value component that you can import from components UI select. Then after the trigger, select content that you can import from components UI select. We are going to map over the years, so years.map. And then for each year, we are going to render a select item that you can import from components UI select. The key is the year, and the value is year.toString, like that. Let's close the select item, and within it we are going to write year. And we have this error, which is strange because we shouldn't have that. So let me check the code. Probably we have an error in the API. So let's check that. Oh yeah, we don't have the await here. Let's try again. Perfect. Now back to the history period selector. Now let's create a new transaction in another year. So test year 44, I don't know, salary. Let me select next year, for example. Create. Let's check. And as you can see now, we can also see the 2025 year. Perfect. Now back to the editor. Then let's go back until you find the year selector. And after the skeleton wrapper, we are going to check if time frame is equal to month. If that is true, we are going to render a skeleton wrapper. Let me center the code. Let's set is loading, history periods dot is fetching, full width false. Then let's close the tag. And within the skeleton wrapper, we are going to use a month selector like that takes the period and also the set period function. So set period. Let's close the tag. Then let's scroll down. Let's copy the year selector component like that. Let's paste it. Let's rename the copied version with month selector. Let's remove years from the properties. Then in the value, we are going to replace year with month. Then we are going to do the opposite here. So year takes period.year and month takes %int of value. Perfect. Then in the content, we are going to replace years with an array, and this array contains 0, which is January, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 11 stands for December. Then let's change year with month. Then let's wrap this function with curly braces like that. We are going to add a return here. Then before the return, we are going to define const month string like that. New date period.year month 1 to locale string. The locale will be default. And then we are going to set month long like that. Then we are going to replace this year with month string. And then we set the key with month. And also replace year with month. Perfect. Let's try it. Perfect. Now let's try to select the year tab. And as you can see, we can only select the year. Perfect. And that's everything for the history period selector. Let's go back to the history.tsx file. And the next thing that we are going to do is to create an API that takes the time frame and the period and returns the data that we will use in the chart. So back to the Project Explorer. And within the API folder, let's create a new folder, history-data. And within the folder, route.ts. Then export async function, get, that takes request of type request. Then let's get the user, also const user equal current user that you can import from Clerk Next.js. If the user is not defined, redirect that you can import from Next Navigation to the sign-in page, like that. As I said earlier, we are going to read the period and the time frame in this API. So const, and then we are going to deconstruct search params, like that, from new URL request.url. Then we are going to read the time frame, so const time frame equal search params.get time frame, like that. Then const year equal search params.get year. And lastly, const month equals search params.get month. Then we need to validate this. So before the get function, we are going to define const get history data schema like that equal z that you can import from zod.object. Then we have the time frame, which is zod.enum, and within it the array with month string or year string. Then we have month zod.coerce.number. Then we set min 0, max 11, like that, and default 0. And lastly, we have year, which is zod, coerce, a number, like that. We can limit that if you want, so min 2000, max 3000, like that. Now we can validate the fields, so const query params equal get history data schema dot save parse. Let's pass the time frame, month and year, like that. Let me center the code. If query params.success is false, return response.json query params.error.message, and then status 400, like that. And then const data equal await get history data. This takes user.id, then this take query params.data.timeframe, and then takes an object, which is a period object, so month, query params.data.month, and here query params.data.year. Then we have this error, so property ID does not exist. Okay, we need to await current user, like that. Then we are going to define get history data, so async function get history data. This takes user ID of type string, then the time frame of type time frame that you can import from lib types, and then period of type period that you can import from lib types. Then we will have a switch statement, time frame, case year, and in this case we are going to return await get year history data. This takes the user ID and the period.year. Otherwise, case month, we are going to return await get month history data, like that. That takes user ID, period.year, and period.month. Then let's define the type, as always, so export type get history data response type equal awaited, return type of, and then the name of the function, so get history data, like that. Now we are going to define those two helpers functions, so async function get year history data. This takes user ID of type string, year of type number. Let me move this because this will be pretty long. Const result equal, so const result equal await prisma that you can import from lib prisma dot year history dot group by. In this case we are going to define by month, and this in reality is not going to do anything because in year history data is already grouped by month, but we need to specify the by property in a group by, so we need that. Then we are going to filter, so we get the records for the user ID and for the selected year, like that. Then, since this is a group by, we can sum the aggregates, so sum expense true and also income true. So for each month of the year, we are going to sum the expense and the income. And then we are going to order it, so order by, we are going to order by the month as send, like that. Then we are going to check if a result is not defined or if result.length is 0. In this case, we are going to return an empty array. Now we are going to define a type that we will use in this function, so type history data, like that. Let's define the fields, so expense number, income number, year number, month number, and day optional number, like that. Before moving on with the code, let me explain something. Let's make an example, and let's suppose that in the 2023 we have only added transactions in the month of January. What happens is that this query will return an array with only one object, and this object contains, for example, I don't know, month January, so 0, then for example income 400, expense 500, and then the year 2023. And this is totally fine. What I want to do now is to add the missing months, so for example month 1, etc., until we reach month 11, because in this format it will be way easier to handle this data in the bar chart. So now we are going to transform this response in what we want. Now let me remove the comment. So we are going to define const history of type history data, and this will be an array. And let's start with an empty array, like that. Then let me move everything like that. Now we are going to loop over all possible months. So for let I equal 0, I lower than 12, I plus plus, like that. Then let's define let expense equal 0. Let's copy this, let's paste, let income, this will be our default value. Then we are going to search the month inside the result, so const month equal result.find row, and then row.month equal I. If we can find the month with the result, we are going to update expense with the month.sum.expense, or 0 if this is undefined. Let's do the same for the income. So income, like that. And now we are just going to push this into the history. So history push, here the month is I, like that, expense and income. What happens is that if we don't find the month in the result, we are just pushing the year month with expense and income set to 0. That's it. And now we can return history, like that. Perfect. Then we are going to define the get month history data. So let's copy this. Let's go at the end of the file, function, get month history data. We will have user ID of type string, year of type number, and month of type number. The process will be pretty similar, except for the fact that we are not going to loop over month, but we are going to loop over days of each month. So let me scroll that. So const result equal await prisma dot month history, in this case, dot group by. We are going to group by day. Then we are going to filter. So where. But before doing that, let's add async to the function because I forgot that, like that, perfect. Then back to the where filter, we are going to get only the user records, so user ID, for that particular year, for that particular month, like that. Then we are going to sum the results, so we are going to sum the expense column and also the income column, so true. And then order by day ascend, like that. Then again, we are going to check if result is not defined or result.length is equal to 0. We are going to return an empty array, like that. Then we are going to define history, so const history of type history data array equal an empty array. There is a typo here, perfect. Then we are going to loop over the days of each month, and that number can change, so we have to calculate that. Const days in month equal days in month, you can import that from date FNS. Then we need a new date, year, and current month, like that. Then for let I equal 1, I lower or equal than 31, I++, like that. Let expense equal 0. Then let's copy this, let's paste, let's replace expense with income, like that. Then we have const day equal result.find. We are going to search the day in the results, so row, and then row.day equal I, like that. If the day is defined, expense becomes day.sum.expense or 0. Let's copy this. Let's make the same for income, so income, like that. And then we are going to push everything to the history, so history push. This is an object that contains expense, income, year, month, and the day is I, like that. Then we are going to return history. And that's all for this API. So let's double check the type right here. And as you can see, this is an array of history data. Perfect. Now back to history.tsx file. And then after the formatter, we can call the API. So const history data query equal use query that you can import from Tanstack React query. Let's define the query key with overview, history, time frame, and also period. Then let's define the query function. So a function that returns a fetch API call, like that. The API URL is /API/history-data, question mark. Then we are going to add the parameters, so time frame equal. Let's interpolate time frame, like that. Then end year, let's interpolate the year, so period.year, and month equal, and let's interpolate period.month, like that. Then we get the response, and we do res.json, like that. Then we are going to define a utility variable, so const data available, like that. And this will be true if history data query.data is defined and if history data query.data.length is greater than 0. Now let's check that this API works. Is the first one here because the key is overview history, then we have the time frame and then the period, like that. So let's refetch it. And this is not working. So let's go back to our API. Let's double check that. So history data. And the problem is that we are not returning data right here. So return response.json data like that. Let's try to refetch now. And as you can see now, we have the data. We have one row for each day, as you can see. That's perfect. Let's try also the ER queries. Let's open back the DevTools. Let's check the query, which is the first one. And the response contains the month 0, 1, 2, etc. Perfect. Now we are going to add the chart, so back in the history.tsx file. Then after the card header component, so here, we are going to define card content component that you can import from components UI card. Within this, we will have a skeleton wrapper. Let's set is loading to history data query dot is fetching, like that. Let's close this. And inside, we are going to check if data available is true, like that. We are going to render the chart within this thing. So for now, we are going to write div chart, like that. Otherwise, if data is not available, like this, we are going to return a card. Let's style it. Flex, age 300 pixels, like that. Flex call, item center, justify center, background, so BG background. Then inside we are going to write no data for the selected period, like that. Then let's add a paragraph, let's style it. Text SM, text muted foreground. And within the paragraph we are going to write try selecting a different period or adding new transactions, like that. And now we are going to define the chart. We are going to define all the imports, so back here, and we are going to do import, bar chart, Cartesian grid, responsive container, tooltip, x-axis, y-axis, from recharts, like that. Then back to the div that contains the chart text, this one. Let's replace this with responsive container, this one. Let's set width 100% and then height 300, like that. Then within the container we will use the bar chart component. Let's set height to 300. Then let's set data to history data query dot data, like that. And then bar category gap to 5. Within the bar chart component we will have defs, like this. Now let's go back to the demo application. And now, as you can see, each bar in the chart has a background gradient. So we are going to define that back in our application. Inside the defs, we are going to define a tag called linear gradient, like this. Then we set the ID property, income bar. Then x1 is 0, y1 is 0, x2 is 0, and y2 is 1. Then let's close this. Then within this linear gradient, we will have a stop tag offset 0 as a string, like that. Then let's set the stop color, and the color will be this, so you can copy that. 10B981. And then let's set stop opacity to 1, like that. Let's close this tag. Now let's copy that, let's paste. Then let's replace offset with 1 and stop opacity with 0. The color will be the same. Basically, this is the green gradient that we are going to use for the income bar. Now let's copy the linear gradient. Let's paste, like that. Let's replace income bar with expense bar. And then we are going to change the color. So EF4444. Then let's copy the color and let's replace also this one, like that. Then, after the definitions, we are going to add a Cartesian grid component. Let's use the self-close tag here. Let's add some properties, so stroke-array, and this will be a string 5 space 5, like that. Stroke opacity 0.2. And then we set vertical to false, like that. Then, after the Cartesian grid, we are going to use the x-axis component. Let's use the self-closing tag. And now, as you can see, we start seeing something. Perfect. Now let's add some properties here. So stroke equal hash and then 6 times 8, like that. Then font size takes 12. Tick line false. Axis line false. And then padding is an object. So left 5, right 5, like that. Then we are going to add the data key property, which is a function that takes data. Within it, we are going to extract year, month, and day from data. like that. Then we are going to recreate the date, so const date, new date, year, month, day. And since the day is optional, we are going to cover that with or1, like this. Then we are going to check if time frame is equal to year. We are going to return date to locale date string. The locale is default. And then we are going to set month long, like that. Otherwise, return date to locale date string, default, and then day 2 digit, like that. Perfect. Then we are going to add the y-axis, like that. Let's use the self-close tag. Then we are going to add some properties that we can copy from the x-axis. So let's copy stroke font size, decline, and axis line. Let's copy those. Let's paste, like that. Perfect. And now we are going to define our bars. So bar component, data key takes income, label is income, the field property takes URL, and then the ID hash income bar, like that. Then let's set the radius to 4, class name cursor pointer, like that. Let's use the self-closing tag. Perfect, now let's copy the bar, let's paste, let's do the same for the expense. So expense here, then expense in the label, then expense bar here. Let's save, let's try also the year one. Perfect. Now, as you can see, I'm hovering with the mouse, but we don't see anything, so we are going to add a tooltip. So after the expense bar, we are going to add the tooltip component, like that. Let me center the code. Let's use the self-closing tag here. And now, as you can see, I can hover it, but we need to style everything and define the tooltip. So we are going to set cursor. This is an object inside opacity 0.1. And now, as you can see, we have set the cursor background opacity. And then we need to define the content for the tooltip. So content equal, this is a function that takes props, and we are going to return a custom tooltip component like this. We are going to pass the formatter to it, so formatter, and we are going to spread the props like that. Now let's define the custom tooltip. So at the end of the file, function custom tooltip, like that. Let's add the properties, so active, payload, and formatter of type any. Then we are going to do if is not active, or payload is not defined, or payload.length is equal to 0. In this case, we are going to return null. Otherwise, we are going to return a div. Let's style it. Min width 300 pixel, like that. Rounded, border, background, so BG background, P4. Within the div, we are going to render a tooltip row. Within the div, we are going to render a tooltip row. Let's pass the formatter to it, so formatter, like that. The label will be expense. The value is expense. Then we will have a background color, so BG color, BG red 500, like that. And then text color equal text red 500. Let's close the tag. Now we need to read this expense, so const data equal payload 0 dot payload, and then we are going to extract expense and income from data. Now we need to define this tooltip row, so function tooltip row. Let's define the properties, label, value, bg color, bg text, formatter, like that. Then let's type the properties, so label string, text color string, like that, bg color string, value number, and formatter intel dot number format, like that. Then let's change the bg text property to text color. Now let me center this, and then we are going to return div, let's style it, flex item center, gap 2, like that. Let's put a div inside, let's style it. We are going to style this with the cm function that you can import from libutils. And let's set h4, w4, rounded full, then comma, bg color, like that. And let's change the closing tag to a self-closing tag. This basically will be a dot, so let's try it. And as you can see, we have this red dot, perfect. Then let's add another div, let's style it, flex w full, justify between, like that. Within the div, we will have a paragraph, text sm, text muted foreground, like that. Inside, we will render the label. Then after the paragraph, we are going to add another div. Let's style it with the cm function. So text sm, font bold, and then comma, and we apply the text color like that. Within this div, we are going to use the count up component that you can import from React count up. Let's set duration to 0.5, preserve value, the end will take value, decimals 0, then we set the formatting function that takes value, formatter.format value like that, and then class name text sm. Let's close the component. Now let's fix the import because we have to remove this build count up. I don't know why it has done that. So count up from React count up like that. Perfect. Now let's try it. Perfect. Now back to the custom tooltip. Let's copy the tooltip row and let's paste 2 times like that. Then here let's change the label to income, value income, bg color text emerald 500, text color text emerald 500. Then let's edit the last tooltip row, so label balance, value income minus expense like that. Background color becomes bg gray 100 like that. And the text becomes text foreground like that. Let's check the tooltip now. Perfect, so now we have expense, income and balance inside the tooltip. And that is what we want, but there is still a problem with the tooltip. You can see that if I move the mouse over the same month, for example April, you can notice that each time that I move the mouse over the same month, the tooltip gets re-rendered. And the reason why this bug happens is that the formatting function is recalculated on every render. So we can fix that using use callback. So const formatting function equal use callback. The first argument is a function. The second one is the dependency array. The function takes a value of type number. And in the function we are going to return formatter.format value like that. And the dependency is the formatter like that. Then let's replace this with the formatting function and let's try. And as you can see now, I'm re-rendering the tooltip only if the data changes. Perfect. Now we are going to fix an issue. Let me open the DevTools. And if I trigger the loading state on the history periods, you will see that the skeleton is not correct. So let's go back in the history period selector. Let's search for the year selector, so this one, the skeleton wrapper that is wrapping the year selector, and we are going to add the property full width set to false, like that. And now as you can see, everything is fine. We need to address one last thing, and you can find the issue if you analyze the days in the chart. As you can see, we have this 0, 1 after the day 30. So let's go back in the Project Explorer, in the API folder, history data, route.ts, like that. And the problem is this one, that we have defined these days in month and we haven't used that. So let's replace the 31 with days in month. Now let's refresh the page and everything should work exactly. Let's try, for example, to select February. Let's add a new income, so test 50, category salary, and let's select 7 February, like that. And as you can see, February this year in 2024 has 29 days, which is correct. Let's try also to add something last year. So test Feb, like that, 50. Salary, let me select February 2023, like that. So let's select here. And as you can see, last year, February had 28 days. That's perfect. And right now we have just finished the history section, which means that we have finished the dashboard page. Let's go back to the demo application. Let's go to the manage page like that. In this page we can change the user currency. We can also create categories and delete existing ones. So let's go back to our application. Let's open the Project Explorer. Within the dashboard folder, let's create a new folder called manage. And within this folder, the page.tsx file, like that. Let's make this page a client component, so use client. Then let's create the component, like that. Now let's visit the page. Then let's replace this div with a fragment, like that. Within the fragment, let's add a div, let's style it. Border bottom background card, like that. Then let's create another div, let's style it. Container, flex, flex wrap, items center, justify between. gap 6, py8. Then within this div, let's create another div, and within it, a paragraph, let's style it, text 3 Excel, font bold, and we are going to write manage, like that. Then let's add another paragraph, let's style it, text muted foreground, and within the tag, manage your account settings and categories. Let me add comments so you can see that better. This is the header part, so we can add comments like that. Then we are going to define another div, let's style it, container flex, flex call, gap 4, p4. Within this div, we will have a card component that we can import from components UI card. Within the card, a card header component, same import. Then a card title, same import. The title will be currency, like that. Then let's set a card description that you can import from components UI card. And within it, set your default currency for transactions, like that. Then after the card header, we are going to use a card content component that you can import from components UI card. Then within card content, we are going to use currency combo box that you can import from components currency combo box. Now let's try to change the currency, for example, to euro. Back to the dashboard, perfect. Let's also check in the tooltip, perfect. Now back to the manage page. And after the card, we are going to add a category list component. Let's set type to income, like that. And then we are going to define category list component, type expense. Now let's go at the end of the file and let's define the category list component. So right here, function, category list, then let's set type as property. Let's type that, so type of type transaction type that you can import from lib types. Now we need an API that returns the user categories. So we can use that, so const categories query equal use query that you can import from Tanstack React query. Then let's set the query key, categories, and also the type parameter, like that. Let me center the code. Then let's define the query function, which is a function that calls the fetch API. The API URL is /API/categories. Let's add the type parameter, so like that. Let's interpolate the value, type. Then res and res.json, like that. Now let's add the return statement. Within it, a skeleton wrapper component that you can import from components skeleton wrapper. Let's set isLoading property with categories query.isFetching. Within the skeleton wrapper, let's use the card component, then a card header. Within it, a card title. Let's style the title, flex item center, justify between, gap 2, like that. Then within the title, let's add a div, let's style it, flex item center, gap 2. And within the div, we are going to check if type is equal expense. In that case, we are going to show a trending down icon that you can import from Lucid React. Let's style it. Let me also close the tag, like that. Then let's set the style. Age 12, width 12, item center, rounded GL, background red 400 and opacity 10%, like that. P2, text red 500. Otherwise, we are going to render a trending up icon that you can import from Lucid React. We can copy the class name from the trending down. Let's copy it. And then let's change the red color with emerald, like that. Emerald and emerald. I have a typo here on rounded. This must be rounded LG. And also this one, rounded LG. Perfect. Then after this div, let's add another div. Within it, we are going to check if type is equal to income. We are going to render incomes, like that. Otherwise, expenses, and then categories, like that. Then within the categories text, we are going to add another div. Let's style it. Text SM, text muted foreground. And within this div, sorted by name text. Perfect. Then before the card title closing tag, we are going to add a create category dialog that you can import from app dashboard components create category dialog. We are going to set type to type. Then we are going to set the success callback. And in this case, we are going to just call the categories query dot refetch, like that. Let's close the tag. Then we are going to move this section near the icon. And we can do that by moving this div within this other div. So we can select this and move that here, like that. Let's remove this. Perfect. Then we are going to render a custom trigger for the create category dialog. So let's add a trigger property. Then inside a button that you can import from components UI button. Then let's style it, class name, gap2, text SM. Within the button, we are going to use a plus square icon that you can import from Lucid React. Let's style it, H4W4. And then we are going to write create category, like that. Now we need to handle this trigger property in the create category dialog. So let's open the file create category dialog.tsx. In the properties, let's add the trigger, which is optional and which is a React node that you can import from React, like that. Then let's add the trigger to the properties, so trigger. Then let's search the dialog trigger, so this one. And what we are going to do is to wrap this button with curly braces. And then inside we are going to type if trigger is defined, then render the trigger, otherwise the button. And now as you can see, we can see our custom trigger. Now back to the manage page. Let's try to click this button. Perfect. Now we are going to render the category. So after the card header, let's add a separator component that you can import from components UI separator. Now we are going to define a variable, so let's go back up and right here, let's go define const data available. And this will be a boolean that will be true if categories query.data is defined and if categories query.data.length is greater than 0, like that. Now let's scroll down, and after the separator we are going to add if data available is false, like that. In this case, we are going to render a div, let's style it, flex h40, full width, so W full, items center and justify center, like that. Then within this div, let's add a paragraph, let me center the code, and inside we are going to write no, then let's add a span and let's style it with the cn function, so cn, then margin 1, and if type is equal to income, then apply text emerald 500, otherwise apply text red 500, like that. Within the span we are going to render the type, and after the span categories yet text, like that. Let's remove this and also this. Then after the paragraph, let's add another paragraph, let's style it, text sm, text muted foreground. And within this paragraph, we are going to write create one to get started, like that. Then we are going to check if data is available. In that case, we are going to render a div, let's style it, grid flow row, gap2, p2, sm, grid flow row, sm grid calls 2, md grid calls 3, lg grid calls 4, like that. Let me center the code, and within this div we are going to iterate over categories query.data.map. We get a category like that, and for each category we return a component called category card that takes the category like that, category. Let's also set the key to category.name. Then let's type the category, so let's wrap that in parentheses, and let's type it with category that you can import from Prisma client. And now let's define the category card component. So right here, function category card. Let's define the properties, so category. Then let's type the props, so category of type category. Inside we are going to return a div, so let's style it. Flex border separate, flex call, justify between, rounded MD, border, shadow MD, then shadow black, /01 in brackets, like that. And on dark mode, shadow white, /0.1, like that. Within this div, let's add another div, let's style it. Flex call, items center, gap2, p4. Within this div, let's add a span, let's style it. Text 3xl, let's also add role image. And in the span, we are going to render the category.icon, like that. Let me center the code. After the span, we will have another span that contains category.name. Then after this div, we are going to create a new button. Let's style it, flex, W full, border separate, item center, gap2, rounded T none, text muted foreground, and on over background red 500, 20%, like that. Let's also put variant secondary. Then let's close the button tag. And within the button, we are going to use the trash icon that you can import from Lucid React. Let's style it H4W4. And then let's add the remove text, like that. Perfect. And now we are going to define the remove button. So back to the Project Explorer. Within the components folder inside the dashboard, let's create a new file, delete category dialog.tsx. Let's make it a client component, so use client. Then let's define the component with the snippet, perfect. Then let's define the properties, so interface props, trigger of type React node that you can import from React, and the category of type category that you can import from Prisma client. Then we need to define an API for deleting the category, so back in the Project Explorer. Let's open the actions folder inside dashboard, and let's open the categories.ts file. Then at the end of the file, let's define a new function. So export async function delete category. This takes an object, let's call it form, and the type is delete category schema type. So let's define this type back to the Project Explorer. Let's open the schema folder and then the categories.ts file. Then let's define export const delete category schema z.object. Then let's copy the content from the create category schema and let's delete the icon property like that. And then we are going to export type delete category schema like that equal z.infer type of delete category schema like that. Now back to categories server action. Let's import delete category schema type from schema categories. Then we can copy the validation part from the create category server action, so like this, copy. Let's paste it. Let's rename create category schema with delete category schema, like that. And then let's replace create category schema with delete category schema that you can import from schema categories. And then const categories equal await prisma.category.delete. Let's set the where. Then we are going to add a unique property, which is name, user ID, and type, like that, which is an object that takes the user ID, which is user.id, the name, which is parsed body.data.name, and then the type, which is parsed body.data.type, like that. Basically, we are deleting a category that belongs to the user ID with the name and the type. And then we can just remove this and return this, like that. Now let's go back to delete category dialog file. Let's define our mutation, so const delete mutation equal use mutation that you can import from Tanstack React query. Let's define the mutation function, which is delete category, that you can import from app dashboard actions categories. Then let's define the onSuccess callback. On success, we are going to display a success toast. Let's import toast from sonner.success, like that. The message will be category deleted successfully, like that. And then we are going to add an ID to the toast. So ID category identifier, let's call it that way. Let's define that. So const category identifier equal. Then we're going to interpolate the category.name, like that. And the category.type. But I forgot to add the properties here. So category of type props, like that. Let's also add the trigger. Then on success, we are going also to invalidate all the categories around the application. So we need a query client for that. Const query client equal use query client that you can import from Tanstack React query. Then after the toast, await query client dot invalidate queries. And we are going to invalidate the queries which query key starts with categories, like that. Then let's set the function async. Perfect. Then let's define the onError callback. And we are going to display an error message. So toast.error, something went wrong. Let's also add the ID. So ID category identifier, like that. Perfect. Now let's replace the div with an alert dialog that you can import from components UI alert dialog. And we are going to use the same import, so components UI alert dialog, for all the components that I'm going to use within the alert dialog. So alert dialog trigger as child, and here we are going to render the trigger property, like that. Let's close the tag. Then alert dialog content, within it alert dialog header. Within the header, we will have an alert dialog title. Within the title, we are going to write, "Are you absolutely sure?" Then we have an alert dialog description. This action cannot be undone. This will permanently delete your category, like that. Then after the alert dialog header, let's add an alert dialog footer component. Within it, an alert dialog cancel component. Inside we are going to write cancel, like that. And then we will have alert dialog action component. Within it we are going to write continue. And then let's set the onClick property. So onClick takes a function. Then we are going to render the loading toast. So toast loading, deleting category, like that. Let's set the ID, category identifier, like that. And then we are going to call the mutation. So delete mutation dot mutate. This takes the name, so category dot name, and also the type, so category dot type. And we need to cast the type, so as transaction type. Perfect. Now back to the main H page, like that. And before the remove button, let's add the delete category dialog component that you can import from app dashboard component, delete category dialog, like that. Then let's pass the category to it, so category takes category, and also the trigger, and the trigger will be the button. So let's take the button and let's move it inside here, inside the trigger, like that. Now let's try it. So let's try to remove the test category, remove, continue. And as you can see, now we don't have that. Let's do the same, for example, with the test selection. Perfect. Then if you don't want to see the skeleton on each delete, what you can do is change the isLoading property from categories query is fetching to categories query is loading. The isLoading becomes true only on the first call. So let's refresh the page. Let's try to delete the YouTube category. And as you can see, I have deleted that without triggering the skeleton wrapper. And that's all for the manage page. Now let's go back to the demo application. Let's click the transactions page. And this is the last page that we are going to build. This page consists of a data range picker and also a table. Now back to our application. Let's open the Project Explorer. Within the dashboard folder, let's create a new folder called transactions, like that. Within this folder, page.tsx file. Let's make this page a client component. Then let's define the component, like that. Now let's visit the page. Then let's style the div, so class name, border bottom, background card, like that. Let's change the div content with a new div. Let's style it. Container flex, flex wrap, item center, justify between, gap 6, py8. Then within this div, let's add a new div. Then let's add a paragraph. Let's style it. Text 3XL, font bold. Within the tag, let's write transactions history, like that. Then we have a typo here, so background, like that, card, perfect. Then we are going to use the data range picker, and we can copy the code from the overview component, so back in the Project Explorer. Let's open components, overview, then copy the data range picker code, back to the transactions page. Let's paste it after this div, like that. Then we can import data range picker from components UI data range picker. Then let's import difference in days from date FNS and also max that range days from lib constants. Then we are going to define the data range state, so const right here, data range, set data range equal, use state, let's type this with from date to date, like that. Then let's set the initial value, which is an object from start of month that you can import from date FNS of new date and to new date, like that. Then let's import useState from React and also toast from Sonner. Then we are going to rename the page component, so transactions page, like that. Make sure to also update the export default name. As you can see, things are not aligned, so let's select the data range picker and let's move here before this div, like that, perfect. Then let me show you something. If you open the data range picker, in dark mode there is a background color on the inputs, so we are going to fix that. Open the Project Explorer within the components folder, UI, then open the date input.tsx file, And then we are going to apply background transparent to each input. So this is the first input, which is the month input. Let's scroll down, we have another input, so let's apply that. Then let's scroll down and apply background transparent also to the last input. And now, as you can see, the background color is gone. Perfect. Back to the transactions page. Now that we have the date range picker, we are going to create the transactions table. So let's open back the Project Explorer. Within the transactions folder, we are going to create a new folder called _components, like that. Within this folder, we are going to create transaction table.tsx file. This will be a client component, so use client. Let's define the component, RFC. Now back to the transactions page, so page.tsx. Then let's wrap everything with a fragment, so like that. Let's move the fragment here. And after the last div, let's add a new div, let's style it, container. And within the div, we are going to import transaction table component that you can import from app dashboard transactions component transaction table. And we are going to pass from date range.from and also to equal date range.to. Let's close this. Back to the transaction table.tsx. Let's define the properties, interface props from date to date, like that. Let's add the properties to the component from to of type props, like that. The first thing that we are going to do is an API that returns transactions filtered by from and to date. Back in the Project Explorer, within the API folder, let's create a new folder called transactions-history, like that. Within this folder, let's create route.ts, like that. Then export async function, get. This takes a request of type request, like that. Then let's get the user, const user equal await current user that you can import from Clerk Next.js. If the user is not defined, we are going to redirect and import that from Next Navigation to the sign-in page, like that. Then this validation will be the same that we have done in the overview section, so const search params equal new URL request.url. Then let's define const from equal search params.get from. Then const to equal search params.get to. Now let's validate the parameters, so const query params equal overview query schema that you can import from schema overview dot save parse, then from and to, like that. If query params dot success is false, then return response.json, query params dot error dot message, and let's set the status code to 400, like that. Then we are going to define the transaction, so const transactions equal await get transactions history. This takes the user.id, query params.data.from, and query params.data.to. And then we are going to return the transactions. Now, as always, we are going to define this function and its type. Now let's define this function. Let me center the code. Async function get transactions history. This takes user ID of type string, from of type date to of type date, like that. Then we are going to get all the user transactions in that period. And then for each transaction, we are going to calculate the formatted amount. And by doing that, we will have the data already ready for the table. So let's start by getting user settings because we need the currency. So user settings equal await Prisma that you can import from Prisma dot user settings dot find unique. Let's filter by the user ID. So where user ID, like that. Let me move the code like that. If user settings are not defined, we are going to throw a new error, user settings not found. Then we are going to create the formatter, so const formatter equal get formatter for currency, and you can import this from lib helpers, user settings dot currency, like that. Then we are going to get the transactions, so const transactions equal await prisma dot transaction dot find many. Then let's define the filter, so where user ID and then date greater than equal from lower than equal to, like that. We are also going to order the result, so order by date descend, like that. And now we are going to return the transactions with also the formatted amount. So return transactions.map And for each transaction, we are going to return an object, so like this. Let's spread the transaction to it, and then we are going to add a formatted amount property, which is a new property, and this will be set with formatter.format transaction.amount, like that. Let me also add a comment. Let's format the amount with the user currency, like that. Then we are going to export the type of this function, so export type, get transaction history response type, awaited, return type of, and then the name of the function, so get transaction history, like that. Now let's check the type, and as you can see, we have the original transaction plus the formatted amount field, plus the formatted amount property. Perfect. And before moving on, we have to fix the return statement in the main get API. So let's do return response.json and then transactions, like that. Perfect. Now let's go back to the transactions table.tsx file. Now we can use the API that we have created, so const history equal use query that you can import from Tanstack React query. Let's set the query key, so query key transactions history, and then let's also add from and to. Then let's define the query function, which is a function that calls the fetch library, like that. Then let's set the API URL, so /API/transactions-history, like that. Let's add the parameters, so question mark from equal. We are going to interpolate date to UTC date that you can import from lib helpers, and we are going to remove the time zone from the date of from. And then let's add another parameter to equal. Let's interpolate date to UTC date to. This is the same thing that we have done for the overview APIs. And after the call, we are going to do then res and then res.json, like that. Now we are going to define the table. And for the table, we are going to use SHA-CN data table, which relies on Tanstack table. For the transaction table, we are not going to rewrite all the code from scratch because that will be useless. What we will do instead is to take pieces of code from the documentation and build our table. Let's start by the installation section, so let's open the terminal. Now the first thing says to add the table component to our project. You should already have that, so let's double check in components, UI, table, like that. If you don't have this file, then type in the terminal npx SHA-CN/UI at latest add table. Then we are going to install Tanstack to React table, so back in the terminal, npm install at tanstack/react-table, like that. Perfect. Now let's close the terminal. Then let's follow the basic table example. So let's start by the column definitions. So back in our code, export const columns. This is of type column def, and the type will be transaction history row, like that. Let's close this. This is an array, so like that, and then we have an empty array for now. Then we are going to import column def, so let's import that from Tanstack React table, like that. Now we have to define this transaction history row, so type transaction history row equal. We are going to use the type that we have created in the API, so get transaction history response type that you can import from app API, transaction history, route.ts. And then we are going to get the type of one element, so bracket 0, like that. And we need this because the response API is an array, and what we want is the type of each element. So if you over transaction history row, you will see that this is an object with formatted amount, ID, etc. If you hover over this type, this is the same object, but at the end it says array, and we want only this part here of the type. That's why we are indexing like that. Then we are also going to type use query with get transaction history response type, like that. Now let's define the first column, so this is an object. Each column has an accessor key, like that. And since we are using types, you will see that auto-completion gives me the properties of the object. So the first column will be the category. Then we are going to define the cell. And this is how the cell will render. So this is a function that takes an object with row. So let's deconstruct that. And we are going to return a div. Let's style that. Flex gap to capitalize, like that. Then we are going to render row. And then we want to access to the API response row. So original, like that. dot, and then category icon. Then after this, let's add a new div, let's style it, capitalize like that, and within it, row.original.category, like that. Now we are going to render the table, and then we are going to add other columns. So let's follow the tutorial. Now let's go to the data table component part. Let's start by the imports, so we can copy this, and let's replace this with the copied one, perfect. Then let's copy those imports here, so table, table body, table cell, head, header, and row. Let's copy those, let's paste, perfect. Then let's go in our component, and after the history variable, let's define const table equal use React table. This takes an object. We are going to pass data equal history.data, like that, or empty data, and we are going to define that. Then columns, and then get core row model. This takes get core row model, like that. Now let's define the empty data variable. Before the columns, const empty data of type any, and this is an array, equal an empty array, like that. We are going to use this because using just the empty array instead of empty data can trigger rendering issues. Then from the second point of the documentation, we are going to copy the return statement that contains the table, table header, etc. So let's copy everything, like that. Let's replace our return statement with the copied code, like that. Now let's go back to our application. And as you can see, we have a table with one column, which is the category column. Perfect. Now we are going to improve this table. So let's wrap everything with a skeleton wrapper that you can import from components skeleton wrapper. Let's set is loading to history.isFetching, like that. Then let's wrap everything with this skeleton wrapper, so until there, like that. Then let's wrap the skeleton wrapper with a div. Let's wrap everything like that. Let's style the div with full, like that. Then after the div, let's add another div. Let's style it flex wrap, item send, justify between, gap to py4, like that. Then inside let's write to do filters. We are going to do that later. Now let's go back to chassis and documentation. Let me make this full screen, like that. And on the right menu, select column header under reusable components. Then expand the column header section, this one. Copy all the code. Back to VS Code. Let's open the Project Explorer. Within the root folder, open Components folder. Let's add a new folder called Data Table, like that. Then within this folder, let's create a new file, column header.tsx. Then let's paste the code, like that. Now we are going to fix the imports, so we can replace registry/New York with components, like that. Let's copy this. Let's replace registry New York with components. Perfect. Then let's go back to chassis and documentation. Then let's select the column toggle inside the reusable components. Let's expand the column toggle. Let's copy the code. Back to the editor. And inside components data table, let's also add column toggle.tsx. Let's paste. Then let's fix the imports. So let's replace registry/New York with components, like that. Also here, like that. Perfect. Now let's go back to the transaction table.tsx. Then let's update the category column, this one. So after the accessor key, let's define header. This is a function that takes an object, let's deconstruct column from that object, like that. And then we're going to return data table column header that you can import from components data table column header. This takes the column, like that, column. And let's also set title category. Then let's close this tag. Let's close the parentheses here. Let's remove one parenthesis here, let's add the comma, perfect. Now back to chassis and documentation, and let's read what is a column header. Basically, this component makes any column header sortable and hideable. So let's test that, back to our application. As you can see now, we have a drop down in the header, we have ascend, descend, or hide. And in order to make this working, we need to add sorting to the table. So back to our component. Before the history use query section, let's add const sorting, set sorting equal use state that you can import from React. This takes sorting state, then you can import from Tanstack React table. And let's start with an empty array. Then let's add the sorting state to the table. So right here, after the get core row model, let's add state. This is an object, and then sorting like that. Then after the state, let's add on sorting change, and this takes set sorting like that. Then after on sorting change, get sorted row model, and this takes get sorted row model that you can import from Tanstack React table like that. Let's try now, and as you can see, I can sort the column. Perfect. Now we are going to add new columns to the table, so back here in the columns variable. Let's copy this column, let's paste. Then let's rename accessor key with the description. Then in the header, let's change the title with description, like that. And then let's remove this inner div. Let's remove the flex and the gap class, like that. And let's change category icon with the description, like that. Perfect. Now let's copy the description column, let's paste. The accessor key becomes date. Then the header becomes a string, date, like that. Then let's wrap this with curly braces. Let's add the return. Then inside the function, we are going to define const date equal new date row.original.date, like that. Then we are going to format the date, so const formatted date equal to locale date string, like that. The locale is the default one. Time zone UTC, like that. Year numeric, month 2-digit, and the day 2-digit. And then let's close the parentheses like that. Then let's replace capitalize with text muted foreground. And let's replace the content with formatted date like that. Let's try. Perfect. Now let's copy again the description column, so this one. Then let's paste after the date column like that. Let's update the accessor key with the type, title type. Then we are going to use the cm function in the class name, so let's do that. Let's wrap with curly braces, then with parentheses. Now let's add cn, like that. Let's import that from libutils. Then after capitalize, let's add rounded lg, text center, padding 2, like that. Then if row.original.type is equal to income, we are going to apply background emerald 400/10 and then text emerald 500. Then if row.original.type is equal to expense, we are going to apply background red 400/10 text red 500. Perfect, then let's change description with type, like that. Now let's copy this column, let's paste, then we change accessor key with amount. Then let's change the title with amount. Let's remove this div and let's add a paragraph instead. Let's style that. Text MD, rounded LG, BG gray 400/5, P2, text center, font medium. And the value that we are going to render is row.original.formatted amount. Now we are going to add the filters. Now let's go back to CN UI. Then let's click examples. Then let's click tasks, and you will see that there is a status and priority button, which in fact are faceted filters. Now let's go to CN UI repository. Let's search for faceted, like that. And you will see that there is a component called tasks component data table faceted filter. Let's open it. Then let's copy the content back to our project explorer. Within the components data table folder, let's add a new file, faceted filters.tsx, like that. Let's paste. Now let's fix imports. So let's replace registry/New York with components. Let's do that. Perfect. Now notice that this file can change over time. So if you prefer, you can copy the column header, column toggle, and faceted filter file from the GitHub repository that I will link in the video description. Then let's go back to transactions table.tsx. Then back to the demo application. And as you can see, we have faceted filters for the category and also the type. So now we are going to implement those filters back to our application. Now we need to iterate over the transactions and extract all the categories. So after the table, let's define const categories options, like that, equal. Use memo that you can import from React. The first argument is a function, and the second argument is the dependency list, like that. Now let's define the function, so const categories map equal new map. Then we are going to iterate over history data that can be null, so question mark. dot for each, and for each transaction we update our map, so categories map dot set. The key will be the transaction dot category, which is the category name, and the value will be an object, so value transaction dot category. Label is a string. Let's interpolate transaction dot category icon, space, and then let's interpolate the category name, so transaction dot category. Then we are going to extract const unique categories equal new set categories map dot values, like that. And then we are going to return array from unique categories, like that. Perfect. In the dependency array we put history.data. Now let me show you the values of categories options. So let's add here a pre tag, within it json.stringify categories options null 2. And as you can see, I'm extracting in a distinct way, and that's why we are using set and map, all the categories within those transactions. Now let's remove this debug element, like that. Then we are going to use the filter, so let's replace to do filters with a div. Let's style it, flex gap 2. Within this we are going to check if table get column category is defined. Then we are going to render data table faceted filter that you can import from components data table faceted filter. Let's import that. The title is category. The column is table.getColumn category, and that's why we are doing this check right here. We want to be sure that this column is defined, and then we are going to pass options to it. In this case, categories options, like that. Seems good, but if you try to filter, nothing happens. So let's go and fix that. Back to our component. After the sorting state, let's add a new state, const column filters, set column filters, like that, equal use state, and the type is column filter state. The second one, so column filters state, that you can import from Tanstack React table. And the default value again is an empty array, like that. Perfect. Then let's update the state table with column filters, like that. Then on columns filters change, set column filters, and then get filtered row model equal get filtered row model that you can import from Tanstack React table, like that. Let's try now, and you will see that we have an error. Filter value to lowercase is not a function. And we can fix that by defining the filter function in the column. So let's go back here. In the category column, let's add a function, filter function, like that. This function takes row, ID, and value. And we are going to return value.includes row get value ID, like that. Let's add a comma here. Let's refresh the page. And let's try. Perfect. Now, as you can see, everything is working. We can filter and clear the filters. Perfect. Now let's also add the type filter. So back here, let's go in the last faceted filter. Let's copy this, let's paste, let's rename category with type, also here, and also here. The options will be hard-coded, so let's define those. The first option is an object with label income, value income, like that, so capital I, lower I. Then let's copy this, let's paste, expense, and also expense, lowercase this time. Now let's try the filter, so income, and as you can see, we have the same error, filter value to lowercase is not a function. We are going to fix this in the same way, so back here, in the column definition for the type column, we can copy the filter function from the category column, back in the type column, and let's add the filter function, like that. Let's try now, expense, perfect, income, let's remove income, clear filters, perfect. Then we are going to display the column toggle component that we have created earlier, so let's do that. So let's go after the div that wraps the filters, let's add a new div, let's style it, flex wrap gap 2. Within this div, we are going to render data table view options that you can import from components, data table, column toggle. This takes the table, like that. Let's refresh the page. Let me make the application full screen so you can see the button. And as you can see, we can remove or restore columns. Perfect. Then we are going to add the local pagination to the table. So let's go back in our table definition. So right here, let's set the get pagination row model property to get pagination row model. And you can import that from Tanstack React table. Then let's go back to chassis and data table documentation. Then let's search for pagination, so this one. We have already added the get pagination row model property, so now we just need to copy this div. Then let's copy this div right here that I have selected, the same one, that has two buttons, the previous and the next button. So let's copy these, copy, then back to the editor. And after the div that is after the table tag, so here, let's paste it. Like that. Perfect. And now, of course, pagination is disabled because we don't have enough data in the table. So now, in order to test the buttons, we are going to change the page size. Let's go back in our table definition. So this one. Then let's add a property, initial state, pagination, and then page size. Let's set to like that. Let's add a comma here. Let's refresh the application. And now, as you can see, we have two pages because we had 4 items at the start, and each page will display 2 records. So let's remove this. Now we are going to add a button that allows the user to export data in CSV. We are going to use a library called export to CSV. So let's open the terminal. Then npm install export-to-csv like that. Press enter. Perfect. Now let's add the imports. So right here. Import, download, generate CSV, mkconfig, like that, from export to CSV, like that. Then let's remove the export from the columns, because we are going to use columns only in this file. And then after the columns variables, so right here, we are going to define const CSV config equal make config. This takes an object, field separator, comma, then decimal separator, dot, and use key as headers true, like that. Then after the history variable, we are going to add const handle export CSV, like that, equal. This takes data of type any array. Let me center the code. We have const CSV equal generate CSV config. This creates a function, and we will call this function with data, like that. And then we are going to call download CSV config. Again, this returns a function, and we are going to call this function with CSV, like that. Now we need to create the button. So let's go where we have defined the data table view options. And before that, we are going to create a button, variant outline, size SM, class name ML auto, H8, LG flex, like that. Let's close the button tag, and then let's also add on click. This takes a function, so like that. Then we are going to define const data equal table.getFilteredRowModel.rows.map. For each row, we are going to return an object, so like this. And this object will have category that takes row.original.category, like that. Then let me add the other fields. So category icon takes row original category icon. The description takes row original description. The type row original type, amount row original amount, row original formatted amount, and date row original date. After this, we are going to handle export CSV with data, like that. Then within the button, we will have the download icon button that we can import from Lucid React. Let's style, so margin right 2, H4, W4. And then let's write export CSV, like that. Let's try now. Let me zoom in. That's perfect. Now the last thing that we are going to do is to add a column action that contains a delete transaction button. So back to the columns definition. Let's define a new object, ID actions. Enable hiding false. Then we are going to render the cell, so let's copy this from here, let's paste, and let's replace the paragraph with row actions. Let's set the property transaction to it, which is row.original, like that. Let's close the tag. Now let's go at the end of the file and let's define the row actions. So right here, function row actions, like that. Let's define the properties, so transaction. let's type it. So transaction is of type transaction history row, this one. Now back to the demo application and let's see what we are going to build. So this is the row action component that has a delete button that triggers a dialog. So let's do that, back to our application. Let's define const show delete dialog, set show delete dialog equal use state false, then return, so drop down menu that you can import from components UI drop down menu, and that will be also the import path for all the components that I'm going to use within the drop down menu. So drop down menu trigger like that, let's set as child true, within it a button, variant ghost, class name h8, w8, p0. Then within the button we will have a span, let's style it, server only like that, and this will be open menu. Then we will have an icon, so more horizontal, that you can import from Lucid React. Class name h4, w4. Then after the drop menu trigger, drop menu content like that. Let's set the property align to end. Then within the content, drop down menu label like that. Within it actions, let's try that, perfect. Then drop down menu separator like that. And then drop down menu item, let's style this, flex items center, gap 2. Then let's set the onSelect property, which takes a function like that. And within this function, we are going to call set show delete dialog prev, and we are going to negate previous like that. Then let's close the tag. Within the item, we are going to use the trash icon that you can import from Lucid React. Then let's style it, class name h4, w4, text muted foreground. After the icon, let's add the delete text. And let's check now, that's perfect. Now let's wrap the menu with a fragment. So let's move this at the end. Then we are going to use the delete transaction dialog component that we have to define. Let's set open to show delete dialog. Set open will take set show delete dialog. And then this will take transaction ID, because we need to know the ID of the transaction that we want to delete. So transaction.id like that. Then let's open the Project Explorer. Within the same components folder of the transactions table, let's add a new file, delete transaction dialog.tsx. This is a client component, so use client. Let's define the component, so RFC like that. Then let's go back to the transactions table. Let's import the delete transaction dialog from app dashboard transaction components delete transaction dialog. Then back to the dialog. Let's define the properties, so interface props, open of type boolean, set open, which is a function that takes a boolean, so open boolean, and returns nothing, so void, and then transaction ID, which is a string like that. Let's add the properties to the component, so open, set open, transaction ID of type props. Now let's open back the Project Explorer. Within the components folder inside dashboard, let's open the create category dialog component. Then we are going to copy from query client until the end of the component, so right here. Back to the delete transaction dialog component, let's replace the return statement with the copied code, so paste like that. Then we can delete the alert dialog trigger. Then let's import everything from components UI alert dialog like that. Then let's replace category with transaction like that. The toast ID will be transaction ID like that. Then let's delete this object inside the mutate function and let's put transaction ID. We still have to define the delete transaction server action. We are going to do that later on. Then let's go back up. Let's replace category identifier with transaction ID. Also here in the success toast. Then in query invalidation, we are going to invalidate transactions like that. Then let's change category with transaction like that. Then let's replace the delete category server action with delete transaction like that. We have to define that. And then back to the alert dialog, let's set open to open and on open change to set open like that. Perfect. Now we are going to create the server action. So back to the Project Explorer. Within the transactions folder, let's create a new folder, _actions. within this folder a file called deletetransaction.ts. Let's mark this with use server and then export async function delete transaction. This takes ID of type string. Then we are going to get the user, so const user equal await current user that you can import from Clerk Next.js. If the user is not defined, we are going to redirect, and you can import that from Next Navigation to the sign in page, like that. Then we are going to retrieve the transaction that we want to delete, so const transaction equal await Prisma, and you can import that from Prisma dot transaction dot find unique. Then where user ID is user.id, and we are also going to filter by the transaction ID, like that. If transaction is not defined, we are trying to delete a transaction that doesn't exist, so throw new error bad request. Otherwise, we are going to create a Prisma transaction, which is a database transaction, because what we are going to do is to delete the transaction and update the month history and also the year history aggregates. So await Prisma.$transaction. In this way, we create a database transaction, and within the transaction, we are going to pass an array with queries. Let me put the code on top, like that. The first thing that we are going to do is delete transaction from DB. So Prisma.transaction.delete, then where ID and user ID equal user.id, like that. Then we are going to update month history. So Prisma.monthhistory.update. Then let's set the where filter. In this case, we are going to use the day, month, year, user ID key. So user ID takes user.id. Day takes transaction.date.get UTC date, like that. Month is transaction.date.get UTC month. And year transaction.date.get UTC full year, like that. Then after the where, we need to specify data, like that. And we are going to expand this object with conditionals. So you can do that with 3 dots, then open parentheses, like that. Then transaction type equal expense. If this is true, we are going to spread this object, and that's why we have the spread operator. We are going to spread this object in the data object. So this object takes expense, then decrement, and then transaction.amount. So what we are saying is that we are going to add the expense property to the data only if the transaction type is expense. Let's copy this, let's paste. Let's do the same for income. So income, like that. And that's it. Now let's copy this, the month history. Let's paste. Let's rename this with year history, like that. We have also to rename the ID, so month, year, user ID. Let's delete the day, and this is the same. Perfect. Now back to the delete transaction dialog. Then let's import this from app dashboard transaction actions delete transaction, like that. Now before deleting the transaction, back to the dashboard. Let's check the year aggregate, for example. And this month we have 220 income. Let's remember that. Now back to transactions. Now let's delete this income, which is 120 euro. Let's delete that. Perfect. Now back to the dashboard. Let's check the year aggregate. Let's check this month. And now, as you can see, the income is 100. That's perfect, because previous was 220. Now let's also try to delete expenses, so transactions. Let's remove this expense, which is 600 euros. Delete. Back to the dashboard. Then year. Let's check this month. Perfect. Now let's try to remove all the expenses from the month. So back to transactions. Let's select from the first of the month till the end of the month, like that. Let's remove this one. And also this one. Perfect. Now back to dashboard. Let's check the year aggregate. And as you can see, we have 0 expenses. Perfect. And now the last thing that we have to do is that inside the alert description, we have to change category with transaction, like that. And that's everything. Right now you have finished the budget tracker application. Now we are going to deploy this application on Vercel, and we are also going to use Vercel PostgreSQL. The first step will be to update package.json. Within scripts, we are going to add post install like that, and then Prisma generate. Then we are going to update Prisma schema.prisma file. We are going to update data source from SQLite to Postgres, so let's do that, like that. Provider PostgreSQL, and then URL environment variable Postgres Prisma URL, and the direct URL is Postgres URL non-pooling. Perfect. Then let's push everything, so git commit, deploy Vercel, git push. Then let's go on Vercel dashboard. Let's create the database, so storage. And then we are going to create a new Postgres database, so create asset. Let's set the database name, budget tracker. Then select the region that you prefer, in my case will be Germany, create. Then let's click .env.local, copy snippet. Then let's go back to the overview page. Now we are going to deploy the project, so import. Then select the project, in my case it will be budget tracker. Let's click import. Framework is Next.js. Then click on environment variables. Let's paste. And this is the snippet content that we have copied in the storage page. Then back to the application, let's open the Project Explorer, let's open the file .env.local, let's copy everything, then back to Vercel dashboard, let's select the input like that and let's paste. And as you can see, now we have set all the environment variables that we need. So let's click deploy, then let's wait. Perfect, now let's click this button, then let's click visit. Now let's sign in. Now as you can see we have an error, and this happens because we need to initialize our database. So back to Vercel, let's click storage, then let's click on the database, open .env.local, copy snippet, then let's go back to VS Code, open the Project Explorer, then .env.local like that, then let's paste the snippet. Then let's open the Project Explorer again. Then within Prisma folder, let's delete migrations, so this, and also dev.db, this one. Then open back the Project Explorer, then rename .env.local with .env, like that. Then open the terminal and type npx prisma migrate dev. Press enter. We will be prompted for a migration name. Let's type initdb, like that. Press enter. Perfect, let's close the terminal. Now we can delete those environment variables. Make sure to rename this back to .env.local, like that. Now let's refresh the page. And as you can see, everything is working. Let's change the currency to pound, for example. And let's go to the dashboard. Perfect, let's try to create a new transaction. Test. 44, we don't have categories, so test category, let's select this, create. Perfect, everything is working fine. Thank you for watching. If you need help, join the Discord server that you can find in the video description. If you enjoyed the video, please press the like button and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.